Hi, got 5 minutes? Let me show you the project structure of a SoapJS service. In the previous video, we added our first feature, comics. Now let's zoom out and understand what SoapJS generated around it. This project is called Comicverse. At the root level, we have the usual project files in the SRC folder. The most important folder is SRC because this is where the application's source code lives. Let's start with the entry point, index.ts. This is where the service starts. Here, SoapJS creates the app, loads the dependency container, registers controllers, enables middleware, health checks, and OpenAPI documentation. So when the app starts, this file connects the runtime pieces together. You can also see the OpenAPI plugin here. That is what gives us docs and OpenAPI.json. So API documentation is not a separate manual file. It is generated from the application configuration and controller metadata. Now let's look at src/config. This folder is the project-level configuration layer. Config.ts reads environment variables like port, log level, and mongo_URI. Dependencies.ts builds the runtime container. This is where shared infrastructure is created. The logger, Mongo connection, event bus, drainable resources, and then all feature dependencies are registered. Resources.ts is the feature dependency registry. In this project, it calls register comics dependencies from the comics feature. That means the feature is connected to the application without manually wiring every use case in the entry point. Controllers.ts is the controller registry. It imports the controllers from the comics feature and exposes them to the SoapJS Express app. Database.ts is used for database commands. When we run make db init, make db seed, or make db reset, this file opens the runtime resources and calls the init, seed, or reset functions from each feature. So config is not business logic, it is the application wiring layer. Next, let's open src common. Common is for shared infrastructure code. In this project, we have Mongo helpers under src common data Mongo and event bus setup under src common events. This is code that can be reused by multiple features. For example, if we later add authors, publishers, or users, they can reuse the same Mongo client setup and event bus infrastructure. Now let's go to the main part, src features comics. In SoapJS, a feature is a vertical slice. That means one feature contains its own domain, use cases, repository, API controllers, request and response mapping, tests, and setup. Inside comics, we have domain, application data, API contracts, and setup.ts. The domain folder contains the core business object. Here we have comic.entity.ts. This is the comic entity. The application folder contains use cases. These files describe what the application can do. The ports folder contains the repository interface. That is important because the use cases depend on an abstraction, not directly on MongoDB. The data folder contains the Mongo implementation. Here we have the mapper, the Mongo repository, and the seed file. So Mongo-specific code stays in data while the use cases stay clean. The API folder contains the HTTP controllers. For example, the list controller maps get/comics to the list comics use case. The controller does not contain business logic. It connects the route to the use case. The contracts folder contains route input and output mapping. This is where request data is converted into use case input and use case results are converted back into HTTP responses. And finally, setup.ts is the feature entry point. This file creates the repository, creates the mapper, and binds all use cases into the SoapJS dependency container. So if you want to understand how a feature is connected internally, start with setup.ts. Now let's look outside SRC. The Bruno folder contains generated API requests. In this project, we have Bruno Health and Bruno Comics inside Comics. There are requests for list, get, create, update, and delete. The environment is here, Bruno environments local.brew. It defines the base URL, so when we run make Bruno, SoapJS uses the generated Bruno collection to test the running API. Next, the Makefile. This is the fastest way to work with the project. Run make help to see available commands. The most useful ones are make up to start the app with Docker, make logs to follow API logs, make db seed to insert test data. Make test to build and run unit tests, make Bruno to run API tests, make OpenAPI to print the OpenAPI JSON, and make down to stop the stack. There is also Docker compose.yml. In this project, it starts two services, the API and MongoDB. The API uses Mongo_URI pointing to the Mongo container. So for local development, the whole backend can run with one command, make up. One more folder is worth mentioning, SOAP. This is SoapJS CLI metadata. It stores information about the project structure, generated resources, routes, capabilities, and generated files. You usually don't start here when writing business code, but it helps the CLI understand the project when you add or update features later. And finally, you may see a build folder that is compiled JavaScript output from TypeScript. That's the SoapJS project structure in 5 minutes. In the next video, we'll go deeper into one feature and follow a request from the HTTP controller through the use case into the repository and back to the response. If you found this useful, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next SoapJS in 5 minutes.